In 2018, nearly 24 students were reported dead on school premises at the hands of fellow students. A number of other cases of child violence were also reported. We look at how the justice system deals with children as compared to adults. My guest tonight are Advocate Morgan Courtney from the Center of Child Law and spokesperson for the Department of Correctional Services, Singabako Ngumalo. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me in studio. Let me just start with you, if I can, Advocate. The effective and efficient management of young offenders is what we're talking about here when we look at the criminal justice system. Is it effective?
I would say that it has the potential to be more effective than it is. What we have seen since the implementation of the Child Justice Act is a different approach to how we deal with child offenders that is focused more on the rehabilitative elements rather than an approach that is punitive in nature. So I do think that the system itself can be quite an efficient system. And the problem lies, like much in South Africa, in are the programs and is the spirit of the Act properly being applied, and is it more of an implementation issue rather than a legal issue?
Okay, I suppose it's always rehabilitation versus punishment, but then it's easier said than done. I mean, that must definitely work from case to case. How do you decide, you know, this kid has gone too far, this kid maybe we can still rehabilitate?
Well, I think the starting premise in respect of children, and our Constitutional Court has said it on many occasions, is that we must start from the premise that they can be rehabilitated and that any decision that we take that could further effectively their best interests and try and bring them back into the fold is the decision that we as society must take. Yeah. Even if we are to err, then we should err on the side of hope that we can still bring these children back into the fold.
Okay. When we talk about rehabilitation, I then have to come to you and look at the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. We'll talk about it a little bit later. But Mr. Ngumalo, can we talk about the rehabilitation of kids within the prison system? Is that taking place? Do you have programs in place in South African prisons to do that?
South Africa, what we opted for was that we will go the route of rehabilitation as against the punishment one. To say everyone who wrongs the society, the court finds that you must be incarcerated. When you come to us, the duty is that we need to rehabilitate you, whatever the circumstance is. And this is the same case even with those students or minors who come to our system. I must say that the numbers, my colleague said, has dropped quite significantly, but you still have some who will come. There's quite a lot of interventions even before that minor gets to be sentenced, which is done by probation officers from social development. So a minor will be sentenced if indeed it's the last resort, if there was nothing else. But even when they come to us, we segregate them from the general inmate population. Yeah. And even when we admit them, we have a team of specialists or social workers, psychologists, who must really sit with that particular person to really get to understand what are the specific needs for this person, what may have pushed this person to commit this crime, so that when we get to put together a correctional sentence plan, it responds directly to the needs of that particular individual. So it's not just a general blanket program that we roll out.
When you say you separate them from the general populace, we're talking about the adult prisoners.
Like adult inmates, so that you've got to give them that type of protection.
But surely within, when we're talking about minors here, it's basically from 0 to 18 years of age. Surely within that environment, there's still kids, some kids who've been in and out of these centers so many times, and then you get a young kid, maybe he's 14 and it's his first time. Surely there must be some sort of where you separate those two as well.
Hence, when a person is admitted, we sit with that person and understand those things. Even one of the questions we ask, have you been to a correctional center before? Specifically to deal with particular phenomenon, because even with adults, you don't want to throw in a person into, let's say, a communal cell with people who have been there for a while. It's his first time, it's a shock element, quite a number of things can happen there. So you've got to give that kind of protection. So even with minors, so the role that social workers do as psychologists, even medical practitioners, practitioners is to really assess the specific needs of that particular minor, so that the program that says, okay, this is going to be your correctional sentence plan, respond directly to that. And I must say that it is disappointing that in most cases you'll find that a number of them are not will drop out from school. You know, you find a 16-year-old will say, no, I dropped out from standard 4 or grade 6, and what's the cause of that?
I want to bring in gangs, and sometimes we have kids that are, of course, roped in by gangs to do some of their dirty work, and some crimes committed by children have been brought in by gangs. And now let's look at a former gang member here. His name is Wilfred McKay. He spoke to us, and he says they are lured into those gangs at a very young age. Take a look.
What is actually really happening in our areas is that the gangs is starting to recruit the guys on a very young age now. It was usually from 16-year-old, but from now it starts even on from primary school that guys get involved in gangs, and even up to girls, they're starting to get involved with the gangster stuff, and so they're recruiting the guys even from this age, because it's easier for a young guy to, when it comes to judgment, they will to come away with crime. That's why they are recruiting more younger guys.
Okay, now, Advocate, how serious is this problem?
Well, I'm not too sure as to the statistics in South Africa. I mean, it's something that I think is probably under-researched, particularly up on the Highveld. In the Cape, it's better researched. But I think it goes to a societal problem, and that's the normalization of violence and sexual offences. And that's not, I'm not putting the blame on TV or video games. I think it's the normalization as a society within family structures and in one's communities. One's role models are often those who are committing these kind of offences. So I think that those kind of gang-affiliated violences, where that gang violence is prevalent in a community, one will obviously see more and more children being drawn into it, because once again their role models are partaking in these particular activities. And as a consequence, they themselves become involved and become, more and more involved until such time as they're brought into the criminal justice system.
Singapore, can we just talk about your juvenile facilities themselves, correctional facilities? They were being run by Busasa. And with what's happening of late with Busasa, it's being dismantled. Who is running those facilities at the present moment? Do you have a new service provider?
I think there's always a confusion there. You know, when you talk of a criminal justice system, you have your home affairs there, justice and criminal development, social development is there as well, police are there, it's us. So then you need to take the Child Justice Act, then all these departments are there. There is a very crucial role that social development plays there. So those centers are run by social development. They are not part of correctional services. Okay. So what's happening is that what you find your deviation program and all other programs, they will take place there, which is they are totally different from a correctional facility. It's only then perhaps when the magistrate says, no, this particular person must go into a correctional facility, or if those alternative programs have failed, then that person will be brought to us. But, those are run, fully by social development, and then we don't get involved as correctional services.
Okay. I want to stay with you and talk about this gang issue as well. Do you find within those facilities for the juveniles, are there gangs in your facilities?
What you find in a correctional facility is a life that you also find outside. Hence, then our programs try by all means, to diffuse that and to rehabilitate people, to say, the life that you may have lived outside somehow may look rosy to you, but look at what it did to you, it brought you here. So then, hence, we preach and then push that, they've got to change that. And certainly, it is true that some of the gangs even, get, even kids from primary schools, to affiliate to. By the time they get to high school, they fully understand how the gang number works and all those things. And we always say to them, gangsterism only has two things. If you are lucky enough, you go to a correctional facility, or you will die. It's only those two. But our programs, we try by all means, to even elevate that part. Hence, there's a gangsterism strategy, that the criminal justice system has adopted, to say these are the means that we've got to use in order to deal with gangsterism. But the society has to confront gangsterism.
100%. Advocate, last question for you: how do we ascertain the criminal capacity of a child?
Well, I think in terms of the Child Justice Act, it requires essentially a two-pronged test. Does the child have the ability to differentiate between right and wrong? And can the child act in accordance with that appreciation? And it's the same test that we apply in respect of adults. And it simply involves an assessment of sorts by a person who understands how to make such an assessment, so most likely psychologists and psychiatrists, and then they make a determination as to whether or not a child can properly comprehend that what they have done is wrong, and have, in fact, been able to, with that appreciation, act in accordance therewith.
Okay, thank you so much, gentlemen, shedding some light on this very important issue in our country. Morgan Courtney, advocate and in-house counsel for Center for Child Law. Singabako Ngumalo, spokesperson for the Department of Correctional Services. Good evening, gentlemen.